let's do this.
Oh, no.
Okay, welcome back. This is the final session here at the Willmer Publishing Conference. It's my pleasure to introduce Peter Armstrong right now as our next speaker. Now, those of you who were here last year may remember that I did a talk about Lean and Agile and why we need Lean and Agile in publishing too. And at the time, I wanted to get Peter along last year. He wasn't able to make it, so I'm absolutely delighted he can make it this year. His company is called Leanpub.com. It does Lean Agile publishing.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay in the back? Yeah? All right. Okay. So I'm here today to talk about Lean publishing and why it's in progress publishing is the future and the past of publishing. I'm the co-founder of two things, Leanpub, which is related to what we're talking about today, and Dashcube, which is a agile project management and team collaboration thing. And so I'm very busy. But first, I'm Canadian, so I'm going to apologize for something. My talk is similar to Corey's, the first part. His is more eloquent, mine has more pictures. Okay, and one slide about me, which is very un-Canadian. So, co-founded Dashcube and Leanpub, both of which were built by my consulting company, Rubos, and I'm the author of 4 books, one about publishing and one to teach my 10-year-old son how to write code. All right, this talk is 30 minutes, 3 parts, 250 slides. I'm serious. First part, disruption. So, Edinburgh Publishing Conference. That sounds friendly, right? Like it's Edinburgh in June. How about disruption in the publishing industry, digital analytics and the future? That sounds kind of scary, right? Now, in Startup Plan, we celebrate disruption. Right? TechCrunch has a conference, TC Disrupt, and the guys in Silicon Valley went to it. Oh, we got a fan, right on. The best show ever. Closest I've ever gotten to that was the launch conference demo bit for Dashcube. Now, in publishing, many people don't like disruption, right? We're having conferences about disruption, as in like, oh crap, we're being disrupted. What do we do, right? This is the theme. Now, this guy, however, does like disruption. These guys do too. So did this guy. Now, here is what disruption feels like to publishers. Jeff Bezos is the multi-armed killer who's knocking you out. There's poor Hachette lying underground, and because of Corey, we all know about that, so I don't have to explain that as much. Now, did you notice something in my previous slides? Bezos, Page, and Jobs were all holding phones. How many publishers do you see at conferences walking around brandishing phones? So this is a conference about the future of publishing. But the future of publishing is in your pocket. Now, in publishing, we supposedly have the big 5 publishers. And I had to go look up their logos to make sure I got it right, because there used to be 6 and now there's 5. Here they are. This is, or was, what's known as an oligopoly, which is few sellers. Right? If you have few sellers, then you have market power, things can consolidate, yada, yada, yada. Here's a really scary word for publishers. Got it? Ready? Mm-hmm. Oligopsony. What the hell is that? So oligopsony means few buyers. So, like for example, in most countries, there's usually only a handful of grocery store chains that buy all the stuff from all the farmers. Lots of sellers, few buyers, the buyers control things. For completed ebooks, there are 3 companies that matter. Amazon, Apple, and Google. These 3 companies buy the ebooks, oligopsony, from the publishers, and then they sell them. So we're in the UK. Never mind the big 5. Here's the big 3. Now, a similar power structure exists with video game consoles. Right? Who do you think is more powerful? Xbox, like Microsoft and Sony, or EA and a lot of the other people who want to make games for the consoles? I'll give you a hint. Now, thankfully, currently today, most books aren't console exclusives, but you know, the oligopsony is working on changing that, right? Create and publish amazing books for iPad and Mac. They didn't say only, but they sure as hell imply it, right? Now, the interesting thing about this is these aren't books, right? They're not. They're apps. And speaking of apps, apps are what you use to buy books on your game phones, right? What if the big 5 publishers wanted to make an app, or since there's 5 of them, if they couldn't agree with each other, 5 apps for phones? We'd have a fight. Now, oligopsony doesn't care. It just takes what it wants. And what oligopsony wants is margins. So, anyone here do anything on the internet where you sell things? All right. What's the margins your payment processor takes?
6%.
If you're like, or else 1.9 if you're really at scale, 2 point whatever, up to 2 point, say 3%. But then you forget the flat fees, so 6% is more accurate when you count in the flat fees. 3%. You know what's cooler than 3%? 30%. That's awesome. If you have an in-app purchase on Apple, 30% on iOS goes to Apple. Hey, let's play a guessing game. If you buy something on Android, 30% to Google. Try again. New Fire phone. 30% to Amazon. Wow. Coincidence. We're just following the paradigm that's out there with the 70-30 split. So I like subtitled movies, so here's me subtitling this statement. Even if you don't want to use the monopsony store, you use the monopsony store. Either way, they make their 30%. Now, in Europe, you guys are more optimistic about your government. I have no idea why, than in North America. And so when something like this happens, you have this notion, hey, let's fix this with the government. Like in North America, we're just like, screw it, let's just work around the government somehow. In Europe, you guys would be like, regulation, unbundling, right? It's like generation, like I was explaining this, like one of the guys who works in Leanpub, he was talking about, in the UK, there was like generation and transmission of power, and the idea that one company shouldn't do both because then there'd be bad incentives, blah, blah, right? So the idea of if you're the monopsony, and if you're the monopsony because you make the phone, and you also make the store, and then anyone else who wants to be on your phone selling things, you get your cut. The bundling of phones and purchasing is a real problem. Now, what it's boiled down to is unless things change, in the future, if you want to sell things on the internet, you need to be in the phone business, right? Right here. That's the next conference, right? Turns out that making an app for the home screen doesn't quite work, or just making two apps on the phones doesn't get you the money. So, conclusion of part 1. Problems. There's real problems. Is there a way for publishers to not be disrupted? So, I don't know for sure. Here's my best guess at it. It's called lean publishing. So, this part is about lean publishing. 3 things. What's lean publishing? What are the historical origins? And how could lean publishing help publishers be the disruptors, not the disruptees? Because when we talk about disruption, we always think about it as startups as, yeah, we're going to go disrupt those bad guys, and on the other end, it's like, oh crap, I'm being disrupted. So has anyone seen me do the lean pub, talk about this ever? Okay, good. So you all get some of this for the first time, even though for other people, it's certain parts of this I've said before. What's lean publishing? Lean publishing is the act of publishing an in-progress book using lightweight tools and many iterations to get reader feedback, pivot until you have the right book, and build traction once you do. That's the definition. It's long. I had to use a smaller font. So let's break this apart. Lean publishing is the act of publishing an in-progress book. Why the hell would you want to do that? So it's based on this idea that a book is a startup. And I say this if people want to kill me, especially the more literary they are, they really want to kill me. I said it in 2010. And lots of people thought it was a good idea, so they started saying it. So I'm going to say it again, and I'm going to footnote that I said it. A book is a startup. It's a risky, highly creative endeavor undertaken by small with a low probability of success. Now, in books and in startups, you have problems. One problem, it is very easy to create something nobody wants. I've written 4 books. At least one of them has fallen into that category, right? Lots of startups fall into that category. Startups and books are hard, right? Surely do your best and hope it works out, right? That's inevitable, right? So with startups, with the book, if you write a book and no one cares, you just wasted a bunch of your time. But the startup, if you go raise money and then no one cares, you just burnt a lot of money. And so there's real incentives to figure out, how can we improve things in startup land? And so this guy, Steve Blank, came up with this idea that, hey, if you're going to go make a product, then you're going to make a product, you're going to end up selling it to people. So if you want to learn things about what you should build, you should talk to the people that you're going to sell it to. And so that's the idea of customer development and his quote, get out of the building. And he wrote a book about this, self-published it, called The 4 Steps to the Epiphany. It's a terrible book in that it was badly put together, formatting was awful, margins were terrible, I'm sure there were widows and orphans everywhere, but it was an amazing book. Nobody cared about widows and orphans. It was an incredible book. It started a whole movement. He was the first Lean Startup Conference, he wanted an action shot of that, and so I obliged and took it to Whistler, and he used this, he used this in his talk, so this is my humble brag. Anyway, so this guy, Eric Ries, had just had a failed startup, because that's what startups usually do, is fail. And so he says, hey, Steve Blank, give me some money, you're rich, fund me. And Steve Blank is like, hey, Eric, take my class. And he's like, fine, I'll take your class. Learning these ideas, and they really resonated with him, and he connected Lean Startup with the idea, like customer development, with the idea of agile software development, and made the Lean Startup. And I don't want to get into that because this isn't a startup talk, but it really resonates with publishing because the idea of you should be shipping stuff all the time in software is really similar to the idea of publishing all the time in books. So Eric wrote a book, actually he wrote 2 books. The first book, Startup Lessons Learned, was actually his blog. And nothing more than that, but he built his audience and became famous on the internet just by his blog. And then we clicked one button on Leanpub and it turned into a book, and he was our first customer. And his second book was a New York Times bestselling book called Lean Startup, which is basically just a subset of what he'd already written, better formatted. And both books are awesome. So back to the definition, Lean Publishing. Next part is using lightweight tools. Why is this important? It's essential because if you use heavyweight, horrible tools like Microsoft Word, you won't publish enough. Do you publish your book 10 times a day? Who here has ever done that? Right. Friction. Friction kills iteration. So this is why we built Lean Publishing as a service, end of plug. Many iterations. Why would you want to do that? So open source software, we heard the idea of a skyscraper, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is about Linux, right? The idea of a group of people on the internet can come together like a bazaar, release early, release often, like Linus Torvalds did, produce something of real value, right? Now, in terms of publishing, this relates in terms of publish early, publish often, and listen to your readers. Like release early, release often, and listen to your customers, right? Get reader feedback. Why do you want to get reader feedback? So, or more like how you get reader feedback. Nowadays, in publishing, we have development editors. And they function as a proxy for readers. So, if you don't have a development editor, what do? Well, readers function as a proxy for readers, right? Pivot until you have the right book. So pivot goes back to Eric Ries again. What is pivot? Well, it means basically figure out what you should be building. And if you're not building right, and change, build something else. Pivot until the money runs out, or until you get time runs out. And you want to get to something called product market fit, which was defined by Mark Andreessen, which is this amazing, really long quote, which I'm basically going to skip. But it basically boils down. It's a great quote. If you use Google PMarca archive and read everything he ever wrote before he turned into a VC, because he wrote all this amazing stuff, and it's literally other people who made blogs out of his archive because he took his blog down when he started Andreessen Horowitz. Anyway, lots of startups fail before product market fit ever happens, and my contention, in fact, is that they fail because they never get to product market fit. Now, that's a bit of a tautology, but when you get right down to it, you can ignore almost everything else. Basically, this applies to books too. The reason you want to publish in progress is not to make more money. It's to make a better book. Yeah, added revenue is just a bonus. Build traction once you do. Okay, so that's basically get grassroots stuff out there. Basically, like do the social media, Twitter, Facebook, etc., marketing, SEO. If you're a publisher, the work you're supposed to do, you have to still do it. So, the definition of Lean Publishing. The act of publishing an in-progress book using lightweight tools and many iterations to get reader feedback, pivot until you have the right book, and build traction once you do. So, great, look at me, I'm so smart. Yay, wow. No. This has a long historical origin, going way back to Victorian England in serial fiction, which was first popularized by Charles Dickens. So he was 21 years old when he started writing this thing called Sketches by Boz. It was a monthly serial. Before then, serials weren't really the thing. He started writing it. It was just some nonfiction and fiction writing about stuff happening around London. Then, next book, Pickwick Papers, started when he was 24, monthly serial. It actually didn't start as Dickens' idea. This guy, Robert Seymour, was an illustrator. He thought about doing a series of sketches, and people like looking at funny pictures, and he was good at drawing them, about a club of cockney hunters and fishermen. Proposed the idea to his publisher. All I needed was a writer. You rang? Sure, I'll do it. but I don't know much about hunting and fishing. So how about I write my own stuff instead, and we change the drawings to match my writing. You like sketches by Bose, right? And let's call it the posthumous papers of the Pickwick Club, containing a faithful record of the perambulations, perils, problems, adventures, and sporting transactions of the corresponding members. How do you think this went over as Robert Seymour? Redditors anywhere? Okay. So one day, Robert Seymour and Charles Dickens had a drunken fight. Next day, Robert Seymour made this drawing for the Pickwick Papers called The Dying Clown. So it was on chapter 2. It was doing badly. Dickens persisted, as anyone who ever creates anything did, and in chapter 10 made the humorous character Sam Weller, and basically the sort of cockney version of the sidekick in Don Quixote. Pickwick Papers became a publishing phenomenon. First monthly installment, 400 copies sold. Last monthly installment, 40,000 copies sold. Now, this is more impressive because there were fewer people back then. So as market share, it's even more impressive than now. Dickens published all his novels in serial, except for Christmas books. For example, Oliver Twist, Nicholas Nickleby, Old Curiosity Shop, and a few others. All weekly or monthly serials. Established serial fiction is the way fiction should be first published. Books are what you do afterward. If you have a successful serial, make a book. Will it succeed? Of course it will. Look, the serial succeeded. Serial is how you built the traction. Finished book was a predictable way of earning profit afterward. Dickens preferred this because he got reader feedback, used cliffhangers, got buzz, all the stuff you have to do to market a thing. This isn't new ideas. People would yell in New York, "It's Little Nell dead!" because things got published in England first and then made their way over, so people want to find out. Now, Dickens didn't just write serial, he also serials. He published it too. He made it. There was a thing, Household Words, a magazine. So it was half owned by him, fully edited by him, published serials, including Hard Times. Now, the question is, if you're doing all the work, shouldn't you just own everything? So, next, created all the year round. Founded, owned, and edited by Charles Dickens. And this is awesome. Look at this cover. Look at how, this is like the title of the magazine and like his name. This is the greatest thing ever. Anyway, so who knew Dickens was an entrepreneur? Now, they didn't just publish his stuff. He also published stuff by this guy, Wilkie Collins, who wrote the first detective novel called The Moonstone. Also, the first sensation novel called The Woman in White. And this was a massive success and led to the sensation novels of the 1860s, whose star author was Mary Elizabeth Braddon. Who's heard of her? Okay, right. Almost no one. And we're in the UK, and I get the same number of hands anywhere else. So she wrote this book called Lady Audley's Secret, her fourth novel, the most popular sensation novel of Victorian England, published as a weekly serial, and it followed in Wilkie Collins' footsteps. Now, what's in the book? Manipulation, bigamy, murder, arson, insanity. Who said Victorian England was boring, right? It was published extremely early and often. She was living with her publisher, this guy, John Maxwell. He had 5 kids, and he had a wife who was either in an insane asylum or with her family in Ireland, depending on who you believe. He was launching a new magazine called Robin Goodfellow. Just before launch, lead serial was failed to be delivered. Anyone ever miss a deadline? Right? So you're launching a magazine, you don't have a serial. I can write the lead serial. But even if you were strong enough to fill the position, there is no time. Direct quote. How do you think dinner was that night? How long did you give me? Until tomorrow morning. At what time tomorrow morning? If the first installment were on my breakfast table tomorrow morning, it would be in time. Good luck. No. Next morning, on his breakfast table, found the opening chapters. Launched the magazine with it. And then the magazine died. This normally would have a problem for the book, right? Normally could have killed the book. However, since she started publishing early, people were hooked, including the famous actor who wrote her, encouraged her to keep writing. She did, resumed in another one of Maxwell's magazines, writing it hand to mouth whenever she had the time. Basically, it's like, deadline's coming, quick, write something. Lady Holiday's Secret was a massive success. It was the 50 Shades of Grey of the 1860s. So Mary Elizabeth Arden was prolific. She completed 80 novels. She wrote 2 or 3 novels in the 1860s per year, published in serial, while having 6 children and 5 stepchildren and running 2 magazines. She was so successful and popular. Literary fiction is essentially, people hated her. And literary fiction is essentially a reaction of the elites against this massive hatred of sensation fiction and the descendant of sensation fiction, genre fiction, which if you go to the airport ever, you see genre fiction. Now, it's hard for us to even understand this was a debate, but T.S. Eliot weighs in on it, saying basically, like talking about drama and melodrama, and saying basically, you know what? Even books which are considered high art, like drama, none of them have been permanently successful without a largely melodramatic element. And we can't afford to forget that the first and not least difficult requirements of either prose or verse is it should be interesting. So this wasn't just sensation fiction, though. Lots of literary fiction was published that way too. Brothers Karamazov, Dostoevsky, Serial and the Russian Messenger. War and Peace, Russian Messenger. Well, parts of it. It's a big book. Anna Karenina, guess where? Russian Messenger. Also fiction focused on social change. Uncle Tom's Cabin, National Era. And so she published the whole thing in a newspaper, so publisher approached her to publish it as a book, but she didn't think it would succeed because it had already been in the newspaper, yada, yada, yada. 300,000 copies were sold in the first year. Millions were sold, and millions were pirated. Piracy is not a new thing, despite what anyone tells you now with the internet. Piracy has been around forever whenever anything succeeds. This is the best-selling novel of the 1800s, #2 in the US behind the Bible, prominent abolitionist event. And so let's skip forward to now to recent history. Fan fiction. So there's lots to talk about fan fiction. One thing people tend to forget is fan fiction. Most of it's serial fiction, right? And there's a lot of fan fiction written. And so when you think about it, when you think about this like a Venn diagram, it's serial fan fiction is what's really taken off, right? There's other fan fiction that exists, and there's other serial fiction, but serial fan fiction is this massive growth. Most famously, of course, 50 Shades of Grey, which started on fanfiction.net as a Twilight fanfiction called Master of the Universe. Does everybody know the story already? Should I skip through it faster? Is it new to some people?
Never heard it before.
Oh, wow, okay, cool. So the best pen name ever, Snow Queen's Ice Dragon. And she's writing on fanfiction.net. Why would you do this? This is not the number of readers. This is the number of works. Hundreds of thousands of Harry Potter fanfiction, hundreds of thousands of Twilight fanfiction. If you want to write Twilight fanfiction, should you just go write some and publish it somewhere? No! Give it to the audience, see if they like it, right? This is what demand looks like, and getting reader feedback and a community. But then she got kicked off because, you know, the sex and stuff. So she made her own website. It was awesome. Check it out. You know, I wonder who these people are. So then she rewrote it as 50 Shades of Grey. Well, she rewrote 11% of it. Like, there's a neat thing called Turnitin.com, which checks for, like, English students plagiarizing. So if you plagiarize yourself, but the thing you plagiarized was yours, but it was a derivative work, is that transitive? It's an interesting question. Who knows? I don't care. The neat thing is that the author Twilight is extraordinarily magnanimous in that she's just totally like not going after her at all, whereas other people could have started like probably the biggest copyright fight of this century, possibly. Yeah.
They could have sued. I don't know
if derivative is transitive, it could be an interesting fight. Who knows, right? I actually don't know, and I don't even know what I think of it. More success followed, big bidding wars, etc. Occupied numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4 on Amazon.com in 2012. But to be clear, this is what advanced buzz from serial fiction can do. The top 3 books in 2012 were first published as serial fiction. Erica Leonard is the new Mary Elizabeth Braddon. Best-selling, first published in serial, wrote very quickly, hated by critics because fantastically wealthy women. Right? Successful women have been hated throughout centuries. Not new. So how could, okay, now switching gears completely, how could the publishing publishers be the disruptors and not the disruptees? You can start by having the return of serial fiction. And actually, this isn't a hypothetical, hey, let's talk about Dickens and Mary Braddon, and then like wave our hands and pretend. This is happening now. Just not here, because it's not happening in English, so nobody cares. It's happening in China and Hong Kong. Massive scale. 194.8 million web literature readers in 2010. 303 million mobile web users. See, here's the neat thing about phones. Like English and other Western languages are kind of space inefficient, especially if you like bad screens from a number of years ago, right? You can't fit that many words on a phone, so it's a bad place to read. China, they use a different character set, which is a lot more space efficient than ours. So reading on the web on a phone was even practical even when we had bad phones. Now we have amazing phones with amazing screens, so it's even reasonable to read in English, like on a phone. So 2010 annual revenue 5 billion yuan, and that's like 1 pound is like 10 yuan, so it's a lot of money, 500 million pounds. Revenue. How is this possible? What do they sell these things for? Well, they're innovating there too. Micropayments, 2 to 3 yuan per 100,000 words or whatever. Like micropayments are happening, and it's because there's no tax on them. What do we have over here? We don't have anything that awesome. We have Wattpad. We have fanfiction.net, and we have blogs, and we have Amazon KDP, and we have Leanpub. Now, if you think about it, publishers could fight the big three with direct web sales of serial fiction. I put an asterisk there. Why is that? Unless the big three, like Amazon, Apple, and Google, who make the phones, change their terms of service to take 30% of any sale from web sales on their phones, or 50%, or 70%, or 90%. You realize the market power these companies have. They're one terms of service line away from eliminating businesses, right? Does anyone remember Readmill? Anyone ever heard of it? So it was supposedly a really good reader app for a phone, right? It's dead now. Why is it dead? Oh, they didn't have a revenue model. Oh, why not? Because they're not Amazon, Apple, or Google, right? Now, could they do this? Could they change their terms of service to take anything from web sales? Inconceivable, right? That'd be like preventing competing web browsers on phones. Oh, wait. So, concluding part 2, the quick thought experiment. Imagine if the last Harry Potter book had been published 1 chapter at a time in a globally distributed magazine or in an e-book store. J.K. Rowling could have bought Scotland, not just a castle. Instead, she's stuck fighting Amazon right now because she's a Hachette author, like everyone else. Now my third part, a demo, ha ha ha, in 4 minutes, no, and discussion. So Leanpub, we are a way, what I think is the best way in the world to write and publish in-progress books. And this is true for authors and for publishers. We have a few ideas that are kind of different than other people. One of ours is ebooks should not have 1 price. They should have at least 2 prices. We have a minimum price and a suggested price. So minimum price is like, say, make your book $5 or $10. Suggested price is what you think it's worth, either right now or when you're done. And then people can pay the minimum or they can pay more. We see books selling for things like a book with minimum price, say $5 or something, 66 cents. Why is that? Because $11.66 translates because we pay these amazing royalties. And so people care, and we actually show on our purchase page sliders of how much the author earns. As an author, you should not need to build your own publishing company. You should be writing. As an author, you shouldn't be doing payment processing, chargebacks, and refunds. They're not fun, and people do chargebacks. Who knew? Like, there's actually some smidgen of torture in this with chargebacks, and this is why everyone loves Bitcoin in the tech industry, tech community. One is just the hatred of chargebacks and the desperate hope that something will end them. Now, Corey was talking about BATNA. It's like the idea of the deal you can do with a publisher is constrained by what your best alternative to a negotiated agreement, BATNA, is if you don't do the deal with the publisher, right? So what's the best alternative to a contract from the Big Five? Well, you can self-publish on KDP, or you can use Leanpub or something else. So our BATNA is we pay 90% royalties minus 50 cents. So the book costs $10, you get $8.50. $20, $17.50. So that's the BATNA. Now you're going to sell less, obviously, because you have to do the marketing yourself, just like you have to do if you have a traditional published book. Leanpub has never had DRM. We've been around for 5 years. We're never going to have DRM. We think DRM is evil and stupid. Leanpub is about treating our customers with respect. And authors and readers are equally our customers. And Leanpub and DRM is profoundly disrespectful to readers and harmful to authors who, some authors ask us for it, are short-sighted, and they demand it, and we say, nope, never. Now, as an author, you should not need to build your own in-progress ebook production and distribution infrastructure as an author or as a publisher. You should be focused on making better books and marketing those books, right? Most publishers don't own the physical presses that produce books, but they still cobble together their own ebooks. We want to be the equivalent of like an Ingram for publishers. We make the ebooks for them, either selling on our store or else for a flat fee, and we're this book production flow. And since Corey's still here, please write a Leanpub book. And you don't have to self-publish it. You can use your publishing. We have books that are done by publishers on Leanpub, right? So we're this amazing way of doing in-progress book sales for authors and publishers. And I was going to say Leanpub demo, but I have 45 seconds. So go to leanpub.com and try it yourself. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. That was wow. I didn't think you'd get through all those slides in that time. That was brilliant. Thank you. I just want to make one comment about another reason why Leanpub in progress books is good. Is just you start getting money before you finished it. Now, how bad can that be? That's
and if no one cares, stop writing the book and you give refunds. Like don't like.
That's just amazing.
Yeah. So that's like what O'Reilly, Tim O'Reilly, who started O'Reilly, does the tech books all the time, and it's brilliant as a consumer of those books. Right, we're not going to have time for questions with Peter just now. What we're going to do is we move to our final speaker, which is Brennan Dunn, and then following that, we're going to get all of the remaining speakers back up to do a panel session to close out the day. So let me wait for Brennan.
So, yeah.
So thanks, Peter.
Thank you.
You guys hear me? Well,
Yep.
yeah.
Let me introduce you.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, so our final speaker of the day is
Sorry.
our final speaker of the day is Brennan Dunn. Now, there's a thing which is happening in publishing which I find absolutely fascinating at the moment, which is people who are taking their own knowledge, particularly in the technical world, and what's your phrase? Productizing your consulting. Yeah, and when we were setting up this conference and we were thinking about speakers, I wanted somebody who could come here and talk about that kind of thing, and there were two people who really fitted that mould, but they were both in the States. And so I posted out on a forum saying, can anybody suggest an author that would be able to come and talk about this kind of productizing your consulting, book plus marketing type thing? And somebody suggested Brennan, who was one of my two people that I didn't think would come. He responded on that forum and said, yeah, well, that sounds interesting. So here he is, Brennan Dunn.
This is my first time to Edinburgh, and I brought the sunlight with me. I'm originally from Miami, but now I live in Virginia, where it's nice. But thank you, Rachel, for inviting me. So first off, I want to plus one what Peter said about pre-sales. I'm not going to talk about that today, but pre-selling is a very money is the best form of validation you'll ever find for any sort of like business you're trying to develop. All right, so today I'm going to be talking about. I'm a bit of a strange kind of author in that I like looking at. I want to make a living off of selling books, and I do. I have 2 books, but I also have software that I sell and got a few different courses and everything. But what I'm going to be talking about today is packaging or tiered pricing. Has anyone seen? Peter mentioned, tiered prices, yes, but I don't consider that to be tiered pricing. And what I'm going to.
We also have packages for transactions.
You have that? Okay, cool.
Same thing as yours.
Okay, so and I'm going to dive into this, but the idea being that you can tap into consumer surplus, or the fact that different people find different values in your products. And the preface to this talk is I was in Philadelphia a few weeks ago. Do any of you know Josh Kaufman? He wrote Personal MBA. He popular book. He gave a talk there, and he was talking about the economics of publishing. And he was saying that I think he makes something like $3 or $4 every time somebody buys Personal MBA. And he was saying, I forgot the number, but it was in the hundreds that he had to sell daily to make sure that he could actually make a living off that book. Now, he does make a living off that book and his other book. However, selling a few hundred copies a day for most of us is kind of not realistic at all. And he was using a $4 price point. And today I want to talk about how you can legitimately sell for, $50, $100, $500, what could otherwise be considered books. So let's dive in. So I grew up, my background is in liberal arts. I went to school for Greek and Latin studies, I guess for the most part. And I kind of classified books into two different kind of segments. The first is what I call consumer books. That's really anything you might read as a hobby or as entertainment. So if you buy a piece of fiction or poetry, or you buy a cookbook or a gardening book or a biography on Churchill, these are all things that tend to be what I call consumer books, and they tend to have like an accepted price range, right? Like so, it would be very hard to sell 50 Shades of Grey for $100 a copy, because there's kind of like we have this assumption of what a book should cost. The second segment, and what I'll be covering today, is business books. The goal of a business book is to do one of two things. It's either to make somebody more money, which is usually the easier sell, or to help somebody lose less money. So, these are typical, anything you would go, in the business aisle or whatever the UK equivalent of that you might find in the bookstore. These are books like the Personal MBA. It could be a cookbook even. If I buy a cookbook, I'm not using it to make money, but if my neighbor buys a cookbook and they want to become a chef, then that is now a business book. And there's a lot of kind of cool hacks that we can do when creating business products or B2B products that I'm going to be talking about in the upcoming slides. All right, so as I mentioned, business books or business transactions are always centered around helping somebody make more money, helping somebody increase their bottom line. And when I sell my books, and specifically the book I'm going to be referencing in this talk, I have three price points: $49, $129, and $249. And off the bat, these are typically, even on the low end, a $49 price point. That's a little higher than what most people are used to spending if they go to Barnes & Noble or whatever to go buy a book. But the reason that I do that is when I went to the drawing, when I thought about how can I teach people, so the book I'm going to be referencing, it's called The Blueprint, soon to have a new name, but I was trying to think, how can I help people generate consulting leads? People were asking me questions about it, and I was like, this would be a great thing to write about. So and I thought, okay, I need to help somebody, teach them how to design a website, how to write the copy for a website, how to promote the website, how to collect leads, how to funnel leads into CRM, and so on. And so this is what I might traditionally do. I might write a book on this and basically tell somebody, well, here's how you design a site, here's how you write for it, here's what you should say, what you shouldn't say, and so on. But ultimately what the person gets is they get a do-it-yourself manual. They get a book that says, here's what you need to do, and what in exchange would be a royalty. I would get some percentage, if it's me in a bookstore, I'd probably be very small. But even on Amazon, one thing Peter didn't mention about Amazon is they have a 30-70 split too if you're within $2.99 to $9.99 price points. So this, I think it's, once you go over that, it's 90%.
That's back to the airway. It reverses.
It reverses, yeah, it gets inverse. So you only get 30% of the transaction total if you want to price anything above $10, which to me is ridiculous. So I self-publish. I'm going to put that out here. My royalties are 95% because I use a payment provider called Gumroad, which is a little more expensive than typical, but they handle chargebacks and everything else too. Here's an example of, this isn't the whole site, but this is the kind of stuff that I sell. So tier that I how they work, and then it show you specifically how I'm able to make a living off just having a few customers. So the first thing I did, and this is the typical book, right? Do it yourself. The people who are price sensitive, they're somebody who might not have a business, or they might be looking into getting consulting, and they want to know a bit about, well, what do I need to do to get leads? Or they might be stingy and might want to do it all themselves. So the first thing I do is I offer, on the low end, a do-it-yourself book, PDF, EPUB, MOBI format. I sell that for $49 because what I've also done is I include an accountability course. Any of you know what an autoresponder is, or use an autoresponder for anything? It's basically just emails that go out over time. So if you've ever put in your email address somewhere and you get an email every few days, congrats, you're on an autoresponder. But what I've done is I created an accountability course, which allows me to follow up with people after they buy and say, have you applied this chapter yet to your business? If so, here's an interactive worksheet you can fill out that'll help you better apply to your business. Another noticeable perk is you can reply to that email and it goes directly to the author. Try doing that with a bookstore purchase. There usually isn't a mechanism to do that. The second tier of my 3 tiers is what I call the client jumpstart, or the website jumpstart. And that is, you can start seeing I'm doing a few different new things. I'm including video interviews. I'm including templates. I'm including a swipe file for copy that people can use on their website. The thing is that they still need to build the website that they're going to use to generate consultant members. But they're going to be there a lot faster because they have ready-to-go stuff that they can literally copy and paste in. And the third is everything else, but I'm also giving them a full-blown use it for your own site, change the logo template that is one-to-one in line with what I'm teaching in the book. And I'll also go in and review the final product for them. Me, the author, will do a quick little email summary of what I think. Why I wanted to talk about these 3 tiers is they're kind of on a spectrum. Where on the low end you have people who are not price sensitive, or who are price sensitive, do-it-yourself mentality. They say, give me the info, I'll do it myself. And then on the high end you have, let's say you've got a successful consultant who doesn't have the time really to actually go out and like read the book and think about, okay, how can I apply it to my business? What do I need to write? How do I write it? What template should I get? You know, and so on. What I'm doing is I'm getting, the more you pay, the faster you get to that goal. The goal being more leads. So I've intentionally structured it like this, and it has done extremely well for me and for my customers. What, do any of you, has everyone heard of customer surplus, or the economic concept of customer surplus? Okay. So the idea is that not all of us, we each derive different values from things we buy. This is when you travel, when you fly on an airplane. If I were to book the day before a flight in class, my price would be significantly different than somebody who into coach. And we're all going to the same place, but I have a different sensitivity to price. I'm okay with doing last-minute bookings. I'm not going to the travel sites and doing comparison shopping or anything. I have a need, and that is to arrive at a destination comfortably, which is different than other people's needs. So, same rules apply when you sell anything, which is any product that you have that's turnkey isn't going to be equally valued for everyone. You find this often in subscription as a software services, where you see the typical like pricing grid, right? Where you'll have different options of how you could buy the monthly software. These all do the same thing. Not everyone has the same needs or derives the same value from your products. So what I've done is I've aligned my packages with all of my products with the identities of the buyer. So somebody who's running an agency, they're going to be less price sensitive than the like new freelancer who is probably going to be more price sensitive. It has kind of that room to kind of do some trial and error. Somebody who's running a business, and like I used to run an agency. I ran an 11-person shop. My monthly, we had to bring in $100,000 a month just to stay in business. So I was like always fighting for new work. I didn't have time to screw around with stuff like this. So if I could have done something like this when it came to getting my own fleets, I would have naturally, the $250 price point would have been a non-issue. So to reinforce another theme, when coming up, try to think of, when developing any product, a book or whatever else, think of ways that you could get somebody to the solution faster. So are any of you consultants or consultant at all? All right. So people hire you because you have knowledge and you apply that knowledge on their behalf. Like that's why people pay. On the other end of that spectrum is, imagine you as a consultant write a book about everything you know. Somebody could buy that, and then it's up to them to implement it. I try to find ways of finding that gray area in between and exploiting it. So if I could, I have a product that's turnkey, that the 250 package I just showed you, which they could tack a zero onto that and probably have a web designer do just that for them. Apply their knowledge about how to build a website that converts and get something totally custom. However, not everyone needs that, and not everyone really wants that. So if you can come up with ways, if you're doing a business book on pricing, let's say a book on pricing, I've done things like webinars or group seminars or even one-on-one consultations, follow-up things, that are ways of me being able to provide more specific value in a way that simply can't be done with a off-the-shelf book that isn't expenses. Another reason that I love tiered pricing, another reason that people tier pricing, is price anchoring. There's a saying about how do you make an $800 watch look inexpensive. The way to do that is you put it up against an $8,000 watch. And this is what companies like Tiffany, they do this, like, this is everywhere in our lives. Once you start to really look at how companies are doing this to us, it's everywhere, which is, if you're providing multiple options, it's not a do I buy from you or do I not buy from you. It's not as simple as that anymore. Now it's do I pay you a lot or do I pay you a little bit? Or do I pay you somewhere in between? And just a bit of free advice, if you are a consultant and you're not offering packages in your proposals and you are interested in increasing your proposal conversion rates, do that. So a month ago, May 13th, I launched the second version of my book, Double Your Freelancing Rate. I don't have a lot of customers. I sold 261 copies, which, if I was making a few dollars a royalty or a transaction, wouldn't be that interesting. But I made $31K in a day because I exploited, or I hate that word, but I gave people who are professionals who are buying to make more money faster routes of making that more money, or than being more successful record. So, had I had a $49 price point, I mean, 261 times 49 is still decent. But what I've been able to do is I now have a $119 average sale whenever I sell my book, and it's worked better for my customers because the people who are looking at my products as more of a hobbyist are able to buy it at a hobbyist price, whereas people who have a vested interest in actually applying this to their business today and utilizing it tomorrow when they're responsible for, let's say, running an agency, I'm able to kind of let people self-segment into something that makes the most sense for them. So, it would be very hard for me to use Josh's approach to make a living off of $4 sales. Like, that would be, I self-publish, I don't go into marketplaces. You won't find me on Amazon. You won't find me in the iBook store. You won't find me on any, I distrust marketplaces. I directly sell to all of my customers. And if I was doing that, the acquisition cost of getting somebody to view my page from my marketing site would far outweigh $4. So I naturally needed to find ways, if I wanted to make this a thing I could live off of. Now, some people write only as a way to kind of book speaking gigs or consulting gigs or something. That's fine. I write in a way that I can actually make a living off of my writing. Another big thing, and the reason I love selling directly to people, is I get customers. If you buy off Amazon, you and the author do not have a relationship. Whereas somebody who buys from, like me, for instance, there's now a relationship that I have with them. And this is really interesting because what I can do is, like, if you're an author, you write a book, and I struggle with this all the time because I buy a lot of fiction off Amazon. It's kind of up to me to figure out, like, is this author producing new stuff I might want to read? But when the author has your contact info and can follow up with you, it's they can reach out and say, hey, and this is what I do. Hey, I've got something new coming out, and you already have a past. It's always easier to sell more to existing customers than to new customers. So you kind of have a way to form this relationship with somebody new. Another thing to consider is, let's say you write a book on getting things done. So David Allen has a great book on getting things done. What if you want to talk and join a community with other people who are reading that book? What do? There usually isn't a mechanism to do that. You maybe you have friends locally or in the GTD, or you find some obscure forum. By letting the author kind of dictate the sale, and by potentially packaging into higher end tiers, like, hey, maybe you'll get private forum access with me, the author, and other people reading this. That can increase the value of that customer, but also deliver more value to that customer. It's just, it's a great way. Most of all the books I've ever bought off Amazon or in a bookstore, there's no bidirectional thing at play with me and the authors, and I think that's a bad thing. So go back to my friend Josh. So he's got a New York Times bestselling book called The Personal MBA. And what I like about Josh is, like me, he's a programmer. So he's got this kind of like hacker mentality of how he works. At the end of each chapter in his books, he has this little like link, this permanent for each chapter, and he says, go share this concept. I tell him he should have rephrased this when issued with print books. It's not exactly easy to edit once it's printed. But what I would do if I were him would be something like, go get more info about that I didn't have room to put in this chapter. Go to this link and get it, and then have a big fat call to action there that is getting email addresses or something of people who bought his book maybe at a airport bookstore or something. Another thing that Josh does is he has like a receipts@joshkaufman.net email address. And at the end of his book, he says, if you bought my book and you want to get some free extra content, take a photo of your receipt and email it to this address. Now, behind the scenes, he just has a way, all he's doing is auto-opting in any to his newsletter. But it's allowed him, I mean, Josh is an author. I don't know if I can't share specifics, but he makes north of 6 figures a month off of this book. And most authors, unless they're like J.K. Rowling or something, probably don't make anywhere near that. And he's not selling tons. I mean, he's not like a huge writer. But he's learned about how you can do things that, he upsells people on these different courses and seminars that he does. He's discovered that building a relationship is so much better than having just a simple transaction. So, and he's realized that customers are better than royalty payments. And I'd also consider, it's easier than ever with technology now to form relationships with your buyers, with your readers, and to provide them ways of, getting more value out of you. And I don't know, there's a guy named Mark Sisson who wrote a book called The Tribal Blueprint. What I like about him is he has this book on dieting and health, where he talks about the importance of omega-3s and vitamin D and probiotics. And he's savvy enough to say, people are going to go to their local vitamin store and try to find these now, and they're not going to know what brands to buy and everything else. So in his book, he just promotes, hey, I've got this thing, you can pay me $50 a month, not ship you your vitamin D, your omega-3s, and your probiotics that you need as a result of me covering the importance of them in this book. He also runs a conference. He does a lot of things that allow him, again, to let his customers self-segment to get more value out of him, which in turn he gets more value in the form of cash out of his customers. So I would recommend all of you to think of ways that you can deliver more value or deliver more success. If you're in the business of writing and the business of publishing, how can you make your customers more successful that is more than just handing them over to your self-manual and saying, have at it? Thank you.
Thank you very much, that was great. So we have 5-10 minutes for questions. Have you got questions from the audience?
Have I got the legs for it?
Okay, there's one just there.
How did you arrive at your price points?
Good question. So this rule that anything under $500 is typically something that somebody can swipe on a credit card without needing approval. The product I released that I didn't really go over in depth, the highest price point is $600. That includes a coaching call from me over Skype. So usually the more numbers, the more high-touch interactions there are. So I do monthly coaching. I do private group seminars over like Google Hangouts. Those are going to naturally be more expensive. So the more turnkey, the cheaper. The less turnkey, the more expensive. And it's a great way to sell consulting without needing a contract. I mean, that's basically what I'm doing. Is I'm selling consulting in a way that doesn't require me to do a proposal or to issue a contract or statement of work.
Microphone.
This question at the sorry. Do you work also with clients that publish fiction?
Fiction is a consumer sale. I think it's very. It is. It's, selling a fiction book it's a consumer transaction. Consumers are horrible at valuing things. So what I mean by that is, I run my own business. I have gone and bought thousands in software during the day while wearing my business owner hat. And then I go and I look at a 99-cent app on my phone and I'm like, I would never pay that. And it's because I'm switching the kind of mental context from being a business owner who wants to buy stuff that further facilitates my business to wearing that consumer hat, where I'm much more price sensitive in a way that really makes no logical sense whatsoever. And that's why, I don't know, I know a lot of people who sell consumers, and it's something I'll never do. But obviously you can be successful selling to consumers, you just need more high volume. And a lot of it is like the viral effect and all that stuff, like how popular the stuff gets.
So you work with authors of fiction?
Oh, do I work with authors of fiction?
Yes, because, well, your customers are the customers that you sell.
So I don't sell to book writers.
Whom do you sell?
Consultants, so web developers, designers, like that. Yeah. I just think, I don't know, selling to a consumer is harder. I like low risk, right? And if you can reliably show a business how your product can help make them more successful, it's much easier to sell than hoping to have high volume sales at a low price point.
I have a question at the back. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you sell too many books that you can possibly handle in terms of the extra features that you offer, that basically you wouldn't have time to cover all your customers?
Yes, so if it does involve time of mine, like coaching, then I will put a limit on how many can be sold. And that's a good thing because it actually adds an urgency factor to the offer, which is buy now only, X available is a great way to make a sale.
I have a question. On your blog, you're very open about the financial side of your business. You publish all the data about what you sold and how much for and how much money you're making from it. I have two questions actually. First of all, why did you decide to do that? And having started doing it, do you have any regrets? How's it going?
Have you known Patrick McKenzie? Okay. So he started writing income reports years back. And for a lot of us, I think, you might see these crazy successful startups or these big time authors, and you're like, oh, that's cool, but they won the lottery. When I looked at Patrick, I saw realistic things that I could do, and that's what I replicated, and that's what inspired me to do that. If I wouldn't have seen that Patrick could do this with relatively little input, I mean, there's input, but it's not working 80 hours a week, and make a very good living, a nice 6-figure living. That inspired me to do this myself. So the only reason I do it is my mom hates it because she'll say why are you income is supposed to be a private thing. Why would you put that online? I also worry about the Internal Revenue Service using it against me in any way if it doesn't match up with my tax returns. But what I found is by being open about how I run my business, it's helped people who are like I was a few years back, who want to make that move, just kind of further confirm doing it themselves. And it has. I've gotten emails from people who have said that they stumbled upon one of my annual reports and been inspired them to.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question if there's one from the audience. There's just lady here.
Yeah. It's cool. It's a button really.
Hiya. I just wondered if you saw any parallels between your approach and things like Kickstarter, where people who want to back, say, a creative output might give £5 for the creative output
That's
itself,
exactly what it is. I mean,
and more money for interaction with the producer.
I mean, see the Reading Rainbow thing that just happened, right?
Yeah.
Like you could pay, what is it, $10,000 in Harvard to like have dinner with you.
Yeah.
I mean, those are people who, like, anyone who bought the $250 package for me probably would have happily bought the $50 package. It's just I found a way that I could offer them higher value for people who are, I don't want to say higher worth, but like, you know, less sensitive to costs. And a really good example, tangential example of this is, you know, a lot of these software products will have these pricing grids, right? And one that does it well was Crazy Egg, who they had like a hobbyist tier, which is $9, and they had like an enterprise, which is up to $500 a month. And there's actually another story from my friend Patrick. And he was saying when he was working his job, he brought that, he said to his boss, hey, we just need the hobbyist tier, it's $9 a month. The boss looked at that, he put a big X through the $9 plan, and he's like, I am not going to go to my boss and say we're getting a hobbyist thing. He's like, cross it out with enterprise for $500 a month. And Patrick's like, we don't need that. He's like, I won't be, you know, I identify enterprise company. If you're doing something that affects a business's profitability, like the average cost of an employee is like 10,000 USD a month on average. Getting a company to make employees more effective, and if they can increase the effectiveness of an employee in some measurable way, companies will pay for that and do pay for it. Look at how much companies spend on training. It's just it's a way to bridge the gap between like kind of in-house high-value training and like books that you might find at a book practice.
Okay, that's great. Big hand for Brennan, please. And then our final item on the schedule is we're going to do a panel session with all of the speakers who are remaining, and this is an opportunity to ask any of us anything, and if not, you could just maybe chuck a curveball question and get us arguing with each other. That's always good.
Yeah, I have fun with that.
Shall Tino's there as well?
So
We have enough chairs.
Is Mark here?
Mark was outside a minute ago.
You can join us with me.
Oh, that's you.
Okay. Fine, we've got all the mics.
So we just pass one around as usual.
Oh, okay, thanks, Mark.
And then we just
Oh, okay.
Okay, have you got any questions from the audience to any of us? And whilst you think about that, I'm going to chuck one in. So my particular bent is entrepreneurial stuff, new publishing models, like what you're doing, what you're doing. So I wasn't here for your talks, but what I want to know is, are you seeing in the publishing world, the old school publishing world, them taking up the ideas that you guys are doing now?
Right. Yeah. So yeah, a bit. When people push it and force it on them, like we have a book, an Addison Wesley book on Leanpub called The Rails 4-Way, which is a book that was not originally written on Leanpub. Like it's the Rails 4 version of the Rails way. But Obi's a very smart guy and very forward thinking, and he wanted to do it on Leanpub and get sales while it was in progress before it was finished. And so he got permission to do that way. And so, yeah, it can happen. And, you know, then you can have, like, for example, the price tiers and stuff, right? Like, one thing I didn't say at all in my talk is what Brendan said about pricing, like having segments. 100% you can do that. And you can do that, like, we have that on Leanpub as well. I didn't go into it, but, like, you should make, say, multiple price segments, as well as having, like, choose your own adventure type variable pricing. Like, people will voluntarily pay more because they want to. Like, Kickstarter shows people want to support creators of things, right? So, you know, but the point is with media companies, they should take advantage of things like that, either by building their own thing or finding some provider like a Kickstarter or a Leanpub or whatever that tries to do all this stuff for them.
And Timo, you're
yeah. So yeah. So for those of you who weren't here first thing this morning, I run Digital Science, which is a sponsor of this fine event, but also a software. That's right. We have the T-shirt here before. a scientific software startup business within Macmillan Publishers. So effectively it's spun out from Nature, which is the scientific publishing arm of Macmillan. And we support scientific software startups like Figshare, run by Mark on my left. And I guess what I'd say in answer to the question is, yes, we absolutely see other publishers adopting our model. The most obvious way is about 60 of them are our customers, so they buy and license software from us. But also, we do see a bit more interest, perhaps not as much as I'd like to see ideally, but a bit more interest in the kind of approach we're adopting. To the extent we have had some other publishers and indeed other companies saying, can we invest in some of your companies or in digital science as a whole, but we also see some of them expressing an interest at least in doing something a bit similar to what we're doing by incubating these kinds of new businesses. Not many of them actually doing it yet though.
And why do we think this is? Is it because the barrier to entry to doing it is the imagination, or the time it takes to put it into place, or just getting buy-in? What do you think?
You should ask them probably rather than ask me. Because
do we have anybody in the audience that?
But I mean, one thing I would say is that Macmillan is privately held. It's always been a family-owned business through its existence. The Macmillan family until the late 90s, and then it was bought by the von Holtzbring family, which is a German publishing dynasty. But what it means also is that, what that means among other things is that they can have very long time horizons. They have generational time horizons rather than quarter or annual time horizons. I think it is more difficult to do something risky and different like that if you're a publicly traded company, for example, and you're answerable to shareholders who perhaps don't have long time horizons and who aren't interested in so much our owners are interested in as much interested in the impact we have as in our commercial success. I think that does make it easier to do perhaps slightly off the wall things that we've done. But I hope that if we can show that this approach is successful, that others will follow.
Any questions from the floor? Okay, then I'm going to ask another question. I can keep this up all night. So I'm going to ask each person individually if there's anything that they've taken out of today which they didn't expect to, or something that they've picked up either a connection with somebody in the audience or an aha moment from what one of the other speakers has said. And I'm going to start. And the big, didn't think of that, moment for me was, I think it was, yourself was mentioning it, Peter was mentioning it, but I think Corey was as well, this, the grip that the big three have got now via the phones and as a device together, I hadn't realised just quite how bad that was. So that's something I'm certainly going to take away from today and go, wow, I can use that as a part of my marketing strategy for what I'm going to be doing next. Is anybody else like to?
So my biggest thing, and this is something I've been thinking about for a while, because I own a lot of print books, and I tend to consider them to be my real books. Things like really good classical fiction and philosophy and things like that. But a lot of my more business books, including my own books, are digital. And I think it was when John was talking about, there's like giant 5.5 or 3/4 whatever floppy from the 80s. Nothing can read that nowadays. And I think I have this massive Kindle collection. What's going to happen if 30 years from now, will Kindle still be a thing? Will Amazon have some if they're still around, will they be progressively updating the format in such a way? I forgot who it was, but one of either the Spotify or radio guy said something like the future of music is access, not ownership. And I know I've seen my music collection disappear at times where I guess licensing issues come up. And that's something that kind of worries me. I own access to these books to be re-downloaded in the future, but I don't really, what if 50 years from now, if I'm still around, if I wanted to read them, could I? So that's, I don't really have an answer, just something I took away.
Yeah. So what I took away mostly was from your talk when you were talking about the reasons you use Gumroad. And so Gumroad is fantastic for people who want to do the DIY. That's what we recommend people who don't want to use Leanpub as Gumroad. And what I took away was in terms of the contact with your customers. For us, we have this balancing act where if you're a reader and you get a contact from an author and you weren't expecting that, then you are angry at us.
Right.
But the flip side is we really want to encourage the author-reader interaction, and so I've learned that we need to think harder about how do we make this as clear as possible without totally making our checkout forms confusing. So basically, I've learned to really focus on community, like more, because for the business value you say that like you get, and I see it. Like if you were our customer, we'd be doing a good job in lots of respects for you, but we'd be failing you in a couple. And I think we need to fix that.
So I've sold about 6,000 copies.
Right.
And I auto
Oh, sorry. Forgot the cabal here. I've sold thousands of copies of my stuff, and I auto-opt in everyone in my newsletter. I haven't had actually any vocal complaints from anyone. People won't subscribe, that's fine. But
The expectation is like I think the expectation is different if you buy something
directly
from an author and they're using Gumroad
versus market.
versus on a storefront like Amazon where there isn't the expectation of it, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And so
I'd go on Amazon if it gave me customer. But I did.
right, and so we have an opt-in thing. We get around 30% opting in sometimes for authors, and the other 70% are either missing it or else not wanting to, right?
Yeah, I was actually intrigued by the lean publishing model, considering this pass it forward motif. I thought I was doing it almost, because most of my short work is building up to a picture that may have some resonance with my forthcoming novel, everybody. You heard it first here. Well, that's what I'm starting to wonder now, you see, because you have a disruptive influence on my perspective of the publishing model.
That's the whole point.
I was coming to that.
Sorry.
So yes, so I'm glad they came on today, and met all these lovely people.
So to follow a theme, for me, it was thinking about these more commercial models and kind of the book publishing models that both you guys are talking about. So I spend, most of my time talking to academics. I spend a lot of my time thinking about academic publishing in one way or another. And so kind of flipping around and thinking about a very different kind of business model and kind of where funding comes from and things like that. For me, that's really interesting and something that can kind of very much out in their field. So yeah, thanks, great for that.
Actually, the biggest eye-opener was with this morning when I discovered that Mark hadn't heard of Cannibal Bush, but it just shows that he's young and ignorant and I'm old and grouchy. Those of us who grew up in the early days of the web sort of have, sort of feel like we need to know about the history of where it came from. But anyway, that was interesting. But no, I've actually had a number of interesting discussions with technologists and entrepreneurs here, actually, which I don't normally come to publishing offices and expect to have those kinds of discussions, I have to say. I won't go through all they've been in the hallway, but I found that incredibly inspiring, that we've got so many people still working on new ideas and new applications, and to meet new people here today was a real pleasant surprise.
So my one kind of tied in everybody's talks, even particularly when you were talking about if opening up an API for your stats and things, and I've seen things before where there's been publisher hacks and things, and they suggest books based on locations and stuff like that. And it's kind of everybody had a point where, as you say, it doesn't matter about access or ownership. And the thing that I knew already but was never really verbalized properly was that the information doesn't care. It's the people that have to care about whether access or ownership is a thing, or whether whether you should be releasing data in a certain way, or it might deserve to have a certain influence on the world, but it's up to the people to make it available to people or to put walls up to it. So the information doesn't really care, but the nice people here too.
So I have a comment about the API, because I've thought about putting an API on my site before. I have one open for a while, and it came down to being a financial drain without any benefit, so I took it off again. And now I'm thinking of putting it back on, because I like the idea of sharing this data I've got. I think some of it's quite interesting. But figuring out how to do it in a way which doesn't bankrupt me for the service costs to provide this free data, that's an interesting question which I would like to discuss with you later.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a question at the back, I think.
Just very quickly, at the start, near the start of this conference, I thought to myself that I had not very much expectations for the conference, but it's been extremely rich, and insights from so very many of the speakers. But I'm minded that this business about the contact between the reader and the author is obviously something which every author, I guess, likes in some respects. But what the web has allowed is that channel of communication between author and reader, which in the academic world we've done in conferences and other sort of places, but it allows you to do so at one stage removed. And if I step on from that one more, is whether you want to draw something, often we do from the music industry, but I like listening to dead people. You know, I like jazz, and a lot of the jazz I like is from people who are no longer with us. And I recreate that, I listen to that, but I also like going to live performances from people who are alive. Fortunately, with John Gilbing, he's given us a neat trick where we can bring back dead artists and actually have them recreated in lots of different ways. But I wonder what you want to make of the music analogy, because we often talk about disruption in the music analogy there. But what is it about the creative acts of writing and of creating that you want to think about from the music side of the business, rather than just this, gosh, people are losing lots of money and we need to be upset about that analogy and the music industry.
Anyone will second?
So one thing I think is like, I read some article about, I think, Dave Matthews Band, talking about, I mean, I don't like Dave Matthews Band, but I think they make a pile of money from their live show, like it's a business, right? And they do a fantastic job of basically, they have a very, very successful, like every year, make like a ton of money from their faithful fans, right? Like this is the 1,000 faithful fan thing. And so this is just like, you know, it's probably like customer segments, right? You have the customer that spends $10 on the, you know, on the MP3, so you look up the CD. You have the customer that buys that. Maybe the customers go to the show, buy a shirt, you know, go to the show again the next year, right? Like it's just, again, it's segmentation of pricing, right? And so, what, you know, buying videos, et cetera, right? And for books, selling add-ons, like the Leanpub, we made it possible to just click a button, upload an add-on. So you can buy the book, or you can buy the book plus videos, or that's, you know, you do book and videos and interviews and the access. So, but this is stuff that the artist has to be interested in doing. Like some authors don't want interactions, right? With Leanpub, we want to facilitate everything possible for authors who don't want to like do it all themselves. We need to set up a platform to do it, but like for authors who want to have interactions, we should make it easy for them to do so. Just like musicians, like Fish, right? Like the musicians that like having interactions with their fans can get devoted fans. So if you want to have the interactions, have them.
As an aside, for a suitable range of payments, I'm prepared not to sing. I think you ought to take me up on that. It's a very strange continuum. The part of the model that worries me slightly, I think, is that you can get to be a different grade of friend with the band, and I'm worried it might be like a sort of there's the people in the mud at Glastonbury, and there's the people in the air-conditioned yurts at Glastonbury, and there's a sort of security barrier between the two. I don't know if it would ever get to that stage, but and while I'm not prepared to sing, I'm very prepared to drink beer and have dinner with anybody if they're prepared to read my stuff.
So that immediately segues us, I think, to the beer section, which if we want to, Joe can do the final wrap up. Thank you all very much. You didn't know I was going to throw that question at you all, so thank you for going with it.
So I appreciate I'm the only thing keeping you from the wine and beer that's sitting outside and has been chilling.
Somebody has started already.
Somebody's, well, shh. So I just have a few thank yous to do, so if you just bear with me for 2 minutes. So first of all, I want to say a huge thank you to our speakers today for giving some absolutely fascinating talks, and I think engaging everyone and bringing across a whole load of new things that I hadn't thought about, and I think also I think themselves and other people haven't. So if we could just give them another round of applause to say thank you. like to give a huge thank you to our sponsors, to Digital Science, Scientific Editing Company and Lismay. Huge thank you. Please go and see the Digital Science stand outside if you haven't already. This is now on repeat. But huge thank you to them, and please do go and see them, and thanks for helping to support our conference. It's really important. I would like to say a huge thank you again to Digital Science, Scientific Editing Company and Lismay. Thirdly, thank you to my organising team, to Rachel, to the whole organising team, to Rachel, to Jan, who is outside and possibly the one drinking the beer, to Graham, and thank you very much to you guys. Thanks very much for helping to do this. It started back in December when we started planning this. It's taken a lot of meetings up and down the pub to decide who we're going to invite, what we're going to do, but it's been great, and I think hopefully you guys have seen that today. So thank you to the organising team. But finally, a big thank you to everyone who came along. We hope you've enjoyed it. We hope you found it interesting, found it useful. Hopefully you can continue to meet people in the networking session over a glass of wine just now. If you do have any questions, please feel free to come ask myself, the organising team, or indeed any of the speakers if you do have any questions, and continue chatting and continue the conversation outside. But thank you very much. I think after the drinks reception, a pub called the Pear Tree was mentioned if anyone wants to continue.
Yes.
Yeah, I was on stage with my throat. So yesterday I started down flight of stairs and then
Absolutely dangerous.
It's Harry as well.
You never know.
And for authors, it written and publishers, right? We totally works for people who have publishers for like it's the, no one's focusing on in progress.
Keep sticking on our server.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I'm just